We had a good trip a wonderful trip to Turkey and Greece. And some of you have already heard some of the adventures we had along the way. One was a 6.2 magnitude earthquake while we were in Istanbul. We caught the tail end of it. And there were some in our group that really didn't even feel it, and others of it that really were shocked by it. Kyle and Robert and Phil and I were there. And so that was one of the adventures. Some of us remember here in Atlanta a few years ago, we had an earthquake that, again, some people felt and some didn't as such. Some of us had house damage because of it back in that day. Also, we had a flat tire on the bus for the first time, and our bus driver was phenomenal. Within an hour of he dropped us off at the site, and within an hour, he was back with the tire fixed and ready to go. Got sidetracked coming home from Istanbul, went to Charlotte instead of Atlanta. We were to land in the middle of all the storms going on here. And so we got that close to Atlanta, and then they said, nope, you're going to Charlotte. We sat on the tarmac for about an hour and a half, and then got back home about midnight on Saturday night. So lots of little things along the way, but we learned a lot. We saw a lot, and we crammed as much as we could in the time that we had. So I want to thank the guys that went along with us and their spouses. And look forward to you traveling with us again. Our hope is next year we'll do the Reformation tour again, which will be Germany, Switzerland, and that much of France. So we'll have a chance to do that. So look forward to you joining us on another adventure with that. So today we're still in the 21st chapter of the Gospel of John. There we go. You remember last week, Kathy was with us and taught us a lot about the first part of that chapter. Today, we're going to be looking at 15 through 18, and I'm throwing 19 in too, just because it's a tag on the end of that particular passage. And so you'll see here the text for, first of all, John 21:15 to 19. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you really love me? Peter felt hurt because he had said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wanted or wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. And after this, he said to him, follow me. Now, this is one of those stories that appears in each of the Gospels. There's a prior comment here that we see. Matthew 28, 1 through 20 is the story of the Galilee, the Great Commission, and Jesus saying, I'm always going to be with you. You can count on that. I will always walk with you. And then Mark 16, 9 through 20, first of all, he rebukes the disciples for not being fully faithful and fully understanding all that he was telling them. But he also says to them, go into the world, go out there and spread the gospel and baptize people, do all the things that I have taught you to do. Then in the 24th chapter of Luke, the 36th through the 49th verses, first of all, he says, peace be with you. And then he goes through it and he says, you know, if you're not really sure about what I'm saying to you or what you're seeing, touch me. And then he says, you know, it would be great if I had something to eat. And so he ate with them. And he began to open their minds to all that was going on and what they would be called to do. And then on John 20, prior to this chapter, 1 through 29, we first of all have the empty tomb. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. He then appears to the disciples in what traditionally is back in the upper room. And then we also have the story of Thomas just saying, you know, I wasn't here. I was out doing the errands that we needed to have done. And until I see Jesus myself, I'm not sure that I can believe in this. And so all of these stories culminate with Jesus giving them more information about what they're going to be and where they're going to be. Some of these, he's in the Galilee. Some of these, he is in Jerusalem. And so we have all of those taking place. But the chapter 21, then, when we get into that, we have, first of all, the post-resurrection appearances, and we've already talked about some of those, fishing in abundance. You know, what it meant to be a fisherman of people. He's kind of closing the loop with the disciples, beginning the call upon each one of them to go out and fish for people instead of fishing for fish. And he once again talks to them about what it means to be fishermen and to continue that under his tutelage with that. But also the abundance that comes from that. He also then restores Simon Peter. We remember the story, and we'll get into it today, where Peter denies him, even after saying, I will never, ever, ever, ever deny you. And then he does. And he carries that heavily on him. And so it's after Jesus's death, when he appears to the disciples, that he then restores Simon Peter. And we'll talk about that. And then he'll remind them again, follow me. You know, just remember everything I've taught you. Remember all that I have done with you and for you. And now you can do it on your own. And then ultimately, there's the sense that this is really the epilogue. This is the closing of the chapters that we have. And I think it's fitting that this comes at the end of John, the fourth in order of the gospel readings that we have. So first of all, I want us to take a look at this post-resurrection experience. We have Jesus, who comes before the disciples. He describes, John does, the final appearance that Jesus has with, it's not where I want to be. Okay, the slide's missing. So anyway, John describes his final appearance to Jesus and his disciples. He is again in the Galilee. And even after all the mistakes, all the failures, everything that has happened, when the disciples, as the scriptures tell us, just don't get it, Jesus is there with them. He forgives and he restores during that time. And so we have fishing then, and what it means to be in abundance with that. Kathy taught us in this first part of chapter 21 in her sermon last week. Simon Peter, you know, they're all befuddled. They have returned to the Galilee after Jesus's death and resurrection. They're kind of, okay, now what are we going to do? You know, we've given up all that we were going to be and do to follow Jesus, and now Jesus is not with us. So how are we going to go forward? How are we going to do? And it's almost like that pregnant pause in a movie or something where Simon Peter just says, I'm going to go fishing. And there's some implication in that. That's what I know. And that's what brings me comfort. And that's what I'm going to do. And so he and some of the disciples then go with that. But we also know that the disciples are disheartened after a night of fruitless fishing. And Jesus encourages them to put their nets out again. And when they do, they're overwhelmed by the bounty that comes from that. And it's a great example, I think, that Jesus is giving the disciples, where he says to them, you can do this. I'm going to be with you, but you can be the bountiful people. You can be the people that continue to bring the gospel to those that are out there. And a result is that more people will come to believe. And so the power of God's blessings and the power of being obedient are lifted up in this story, because it is a great way for Jesus to empower them to go forward. Then we also have the restoration of Simon Peter. And I think it's interesting in this particular passage that he uses his full name, to make the point that he is a new body. He is a new person through this experience. So he keeps reminding him along the way. So Jesus calls out Peter, especially asking him about his love. And he gives him a chance in that to commission him to feed the lambs, to tend to the sheep and to feed the sheep. Leading to the nurturing community of what it means to be a part of faith. All of us know within the faith community, that's one reason that being a Christian is hard to do isolated. It's hard to be a part of the fellowship of the church if you're not in the church, if you're not a part of a faith community. And so he says to them at this point, says to Simon Peter, here's the work that you need to do. And in some ways, some of the commentaries I was reading and some of the comments that were made is that this is almost Jesus commissioning Peter to become the shepherd himself. You're the lead guy now. And we know going forward that Peter becomes the head of the Catholic Church, ultimately. The church as it was beginning, and what we know now as the Catholic Church. Paul becomes the head of the Orthodox Church. Going out into the world to reach out to the Gentiles primarily. Peter reaches primarily to the Jewish community and creates the new church from that. And so both of these guys are going at it, but Peter is given an opportunity to really be the lead, to take it and to run with it. And so the forgiveness that restores Peter, and I think all of us too, we find in this story, there's times when we fall short. There's times that we don't really do what God has asked us to be and do, that we need to confess and that we need to say, yes, Lord, I love you, even when I fall short with that. And so he tends to do that. And so Peter, once again, is repeatedly, even though he failed a number of times, still has an opportunity to be brought whole into the fellowship of the life of the church. And then he also reminds them again, follow Jesus even when the road is hard. You've already lived through some difficult things as disciples. This last few weeks has really been heavy and hard on us, but yet you are still together. You're still the community. And there's difficulty. There's going to be hardships along the way. You envision Jesus understanding and knowing the persecution and the challenge that the disciples are going to be having going forward. And he encourages them. He gives them what they hopefully will need to endure. And that around each turn, there's going to be something new. And they rely on each other and the new faith community that is formed with this. There's also the importance, I think, in this story of following Jesus and what Jesus taught. The teaching that he did, the example that he gave them for the situations that they would find themselves. Jesus has given them through the Spirit, the power to do the things that they need to do to be the church and to lead the gospel with that. So we're looking forward to the next chapter that we have in life with each of these disciples. And then ultimately, as I said, the final word. This is most scholars consider this to be the epilogue, the kind of closing of the loop in the life of Jesus and disciples, and the beginning of a new thing. It is the final later. It's the fit conclusion to what is taking place in the life of the disciples. We have experienced Easter recently here, and it was a great way to culminate the year that we have had in the Christian year. We understand, that we begin in Advent with the beginning of the new Christian year each year. And so either Thanksgiving weekend or the first weekend in December each year, it is a happy new year for the life of the church. And we begin the journey with Jesus and his disciples with his birth, and then we have all the steps that take place until ultimately we get to this point of resurrection. And we as a church then, for the rest of this time until we get to that last Sunday in the Christian year, go through the life and the kingdom of God, of Jesus, and the kingdom of God, and all the things that we need to know. And it's just a continuous reminder of each of the Gospels and what they tell us about who and what Jesus is. So each year, liturgically, we go through this cycle where we remember what Jesus taught us and how we apply it and what we do with that. So we then move on to the dialogue that we have with Peter for this week. We know about the threefold denial of Peter and Jesus prior to the crucifixion, and Jesus basically expunges him of this. He doesn't forget, but he also forgives with that. And sometimes we have had experiences in our own life where folks have not forgotten maybe what was done, but they forgive us. And they give us the gift of, let's move on. Let's take this and don't dwell in something that's in the past. And Jesus, I can almost imagine for Peter, just lifts that burden totally off of him to become the new church in some way. Peter is in commission, as I said, as the shepherd of the flock, given the opportunity to move forward. He's promised that he too, as the good shepherd, will ultimately lay down his life also for Jesus. Not immediately, later on, and that's what Jesus is somewhat foretelling in this scripture passage. Right now, you're having the freedom, as most younger people are, to do the things that you want to do and go where you want to go. And ultimately, there's going to be a time when you're going to be called in to live a life that will be a challenge for you. And ultimately will lead you to follow the cross as Jesus. And I think it's interesting that even with that, Peter denying him knowing Jesus because he's going to the cross, ultimately by tradition for him to end up on the cross himself as a way to do that. And that he'll lay down his life for the good of the kingdom. It's a reaffirmation, I think, of Peter's call to follow Jesus. It's also a recognition of Peter's continued leadership in the band of followers that we call disciples. And tradition is that he is martyred. And he probably crucified by Nero as the emperor at that point. And by tradition, he is hung upside down because the tradition is that Peter himself says, I'm not worthy to be crucified as Christ was crucified. So turn me upside down as a way to do that. Amazing things with that. But I thought it would be interesting, talking around your table just a minute about in this, Jesus says to him, about these things that we do in that scripture passage. If you remember that, let me roll that back up for us. Jesus says to them, Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? What did he mean by these? Talk amongst yourself briefly. It's interesting to note in the 26th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Yes. Yes. Is Nero actually named? No, that's tradition. Right. Can you repeat that? Oh, he asked if Nero is actually mentioned in the Bible as the one who crucified Peter. And the answer is it is tradition, to my knowledge. It's not in the scriptures as such. There we go. Okay, there we go. One of the things in Matthew 26, the 33rd verse, Peter denies before he denies Jesus 3 times. He claims to Jesus that he really loves him more than any of the other disciples. And I think what Jesus is doing at this point is asking if that's still true. Do you really believe that still, Peter? Is that something that you still have in your heart with that? And then one of the other ways of looking at it that I don't think really has a lot of credibility, but there is that rumor that's out there and tradition that's out there, is that he's asking Peter in the midst of the fish, do you really love me more than fishing? If you've gone back to doing this after you have followed me and you've gone back to this old trade, is that something that you're more comfortable with? Is that something you love more than me? These fish, these boats? I think it's an interesting supposition with that, to think that might be part of what he's talking about. But on the other way of looking at it, obviously, is he willing to give up fishing again? Are you willing to go back to fishing for people? Are you really loving me so much that you're just going to keep committing your life to being a faithful follower of mine? And then I think ultimately too is Peter's heart open to it? Is Peter's heart really prepared to take on all that will come before him? And I think it's an interesting thought with these. Anything come up from a table that you thought was an interesting comment or perspective related to what these means? Well, that was my thoughts on it, at least. Maybe it is ultimately taking on the role in the mantle that really has been given with them. But we also know that he says to him, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. Even though Jesus is leaving, the flock is still his. It's not Peter's. It doesn't become Peter's disciples. They're still disciples of Jesus Christ. And so Peter is to take care of them just as a shepherd would take care of the sheep. And we know by our understanding of the role of the good shepherd is to provide what the sheep need, to care for them, to gather them together, to protect them, to attend to them, to guide them, all of those things that ultimately Jesus does for us, and then God, even in the Old Testament, does for God's people, is provide for those. Peter was aware of the need to be asked, do you love me a third time? But it was painful. This just brings back all of this again for Peter. I can imagine Peter sitting there and really feeling put on the spot again, ultimately, passionately, Lord, I love you. I can't believe, you're asking me that again, but I understand why. I understand that I've done this before, and for me to be a faithful follower of yours. And so it's a question, I think, for 3 times, especially that third one, that it really grieves Paul, not Paul, but Peter, in that. But he ultimately understands and then takes on the mantle that Christ has given him. If it is as if Peter knew better than, or Jesus knew Peter better than Peter knew himself with this. Jesus didn't ask Peter, are you sorry? Will you just tell me you were sorry for what you did? Or will you promise never to do this again? That's not what he asked him. He just said, reaffirm the love you have for me. And so Peter is challenged to love Christ as Christ has ultimately loved him, has gone the extra mile with him. I would think Peter feels with that. And then ultimately, we know that he talks about when he's younger, he reminded him of where he had come from, which I thought was an interesting thought. He says to him, there's a life before this, and you are different now than you were then. At that time, you had less responsibilities that you have before you now. The road ahead before us is very challenging. Peter had denied Jesus to avoid the cross, and now, as I said before, he's committed to it. He's destined for it, or at least something like that. And by tradition, it's 34 years from the time Peter has this encounter with Jesus that his crucifixion himself takes place. And so it's a good long time. And Jesus seems to know this is not going to be an immediate thing. It's going to be a life thing. And you're going to need to work at it all during this time. But yet, in the midst of that, I'm calling you to follow me. Once again, Jesus gave his last words to Peter just as he had given the words to him beginning his ministry. Keep on following me, is what Jesus says. Keep on keeping on. And interestingly, the verb that is used here in Greek goes from, even at this point, is a present tense verb. He changes the verb than what it was before, to the point that this is a personal experience. One of the things I shared briefly with our folks on our trip, we remembered our baptism at the house of Lydia, or at the site of Lydia there at Philippi, the first convert in the European soil for Paul to come. And one of the things I'm reminded of when I go to that place is that my baptism is not something that I once did. My baptism is what I am. I am baptized. It's not I was baptized. I am baptized. And I think it's the same for Peter here. The verb is a present tense thing. I love you, Lord. Not that I did love you. I love you, Lord, right now in this place at this moment. And I think we have a chance to renew that in each of us each day. So here are some questions. Oops. There we go. If you had been Peter, how would you have responded to Jesus asking the question, do you love me, a third time in your life? Has Jesus kind of done that for you? Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. What is he asking to do for the flock? What is it he's asking Peter to do to feed them in a way and care for them? Why is Jesus concerned that we are not to compare ourselves with other disciples, or Jesus, Peter with that? And then when have you felt you were beyond forgiveness? Is there a time that maybe you felt like Peter possibly felt, where I've done something so strong and so difficult that I just don't know that folks are ever going to forgive me for this? Talk amongst yourselves.